It's really something, isn't it? How just a few clicks, a few photos online can suddenly engulf public figures in a real storm.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what we saw happen in Singapore recently. You probably saw some headlines, cabinet ministers suddenly tangled up in this viral thing on Facebook.
Absolutely. It's such a clear example of how narratives, well, how they can just explode in the digital age.
Yeah.
And how the lines get blurred,
Yeah.
between what happens online and the actual real-world impact, especially for people in the public eye.
So let's dive in. At the heart of this, we have Health Minister Ong Ye-kung and Transport Minister Chee Hong-tat.
Right.
They got caught up in this whole thing after photos popped up showing them with a Facebook user, Slang Chia Huat, known online as Rich Sweng.
The key thing, the real catalyst here, was that Swang then made some pretty serious claims.
Yeah, our sources lay it out pretty clearly. Swang Chia Huat posted on Facebook basically alleging that these ministers and Labor Chief Meng too,
Mm-hmm.
that they knew about and maybe even, well, condoned what Haijin was doing.
And Haijin, you might remember that name, he's the one convicted back in 2024 for money laundering. Got deported.
Exactly. Money laundering, basically making dirty money look clean, a serious crime.
So these photos appear, and then bam, these allegations. It immediately puts this idea out there, guilt by association.
Right. Just because they were in a photo with someone who later got convicted, the implication is maybe they knew, maybe they approved.
Which is such a powerful thing in public life, isn't it? Public trust is everything for these figures.
Everything.
Even just the hint, the appearance of something improper, can be incredibly damaging.
And our sources show the ministers reacted fast and strongly.
They did. They put out a joint statement, really forcefully denying any personal ties to Haijin.
Adamant about it.
And they gave context for the photos, which is crucial. They stressed these were taken at public events.
Not like private meetings or anything.
Exactly, not private gatherings. Think about it. Ministers, public figures, they attend countless events, dinners, community functions.
Hundreds of people sometimes. And it turned out some of these specific events were hosted by Sam Goy, the Popia King.
Mm-hmm. Sam Goy himself came forward, confirmed he hosted, paid for them, and, importantly, said they followed all the rules at the time.
Right. So legitimate public functions, not shady backroom deals.
That adds another layer of context.
The ministers also made a really practical point, didn't they, about the sheer number of people they meet.
Yeah. They interact with so many individuals, community events, walkabouts, dialogues.
How could you possibly run background checks on every single person you might end up in a photo with?
They basically said it's just not feasible. It raises that tension, In this age, where every phone's a camera, everything's potentially online, what's reasonable to expect?
Yeah.
Their main point, as the source material shows, was focused on their integrity. That they do their jobs properly, regardless of who they happen to stand next to for a picture at some event.
Okay, so you have the allegations flying, the ministers pushing back hard. But then things took a bit of a turn.
A pretty unexpected one, according to our sources.
Sting Chia Huat, the guy who started it all with the Facebook posts,
Yeah.
he issues a public apology.
And not just any apology, right? It was described as unreserved.
Exactly. Not just a quick sorry. He actually deleted all those original Facebook posts, wrote a formal apology letter, and even posted a screenshot of it online. Very public.
That's quite a step back from his initial stance.
It is. And then what he offered, well, that was also interesting. Instead of money, which you often see in these kinds of disputes,
Right, damages.
he proposed doing 300 hours of community service.
Community service, that's different.
He explained it by saying he was facing financial hardship, said his business closed back in April.
Okay, so that provides some context for the offer. Makes it maybe less about avoiding payment and more about offering what he could.
Possibly. He also mentioned he'd been volunteering since 2019.
Oh, really?
Yeah, working with disadvantaged families, the elderly, people dealing with hoarding issues. Claimed he had a history of it.
Interesting. So framing the community service, not just as a punishment, but maybe as something he already does.
And then, maybe the most surprising bit, he invited the ministers to volunteer alongside him.
Invited the ministers.
Yep. But with a specific condition: no media, no photos.
Wow. No media, no photos. That suggests maybe a genuine attempt to make amends personally, away from the spotlight that caused the trouble in the first place.
Could be. It definitely presents a different kind of way to try and fix things.
Okay, so how did the ministers react to this offer?
Well, this is where it gets revealing. Ministers Ong and Chee, they acknowledge the apology, recognized he'd retracted his claims.
Okay.
But the sources point out they didn't directly comment on the community service idea.
No response to that specific proposal.
Not directly, no.
Huh. Interesting. There's silence there. Could mean anything, really. Maybe the public apology was enough for them. Maybe they just weren't sure how to respond to that offer.
It raises that question, doesn't it? In the public square, what does it really take to make things right after something like this?
Now, compare their reaction to Meng's, the labor chief.
Right. His stance was quite different.
Much different. He had earlier demanded the works: full retraction, clear apology, and a donation to charity.
And he'd threatened legal action, too, if Spong didn't comply.
So a much more traditional approach there, focused on compensation for the damage, potential legal consequences.
This divergence really highlights the different ways people think about resolving these public disputes.
It really does. Chee Meng's view seems more aligned with, seeking clear redress for reputational harm.
This whole saga, it really forces you to grapple with some big questions, like, should we judge public figures based on who they happen to be photographed with, especially if it's just a fleeting moment at a public event and they don't even know the person? It feels like a dangerous path.
It really does. That whole guilt by association thing,
Yeah.
it taps into our tendency to make snap judgments.
Yeah.
But as this shows, those quick takes can be unfair and have real consequences.
And what about apologies? Is offering community service, like Selene did, a valid way to make amends?
That's a fascinating point. Does it carry the same weight as paying damages? Or could it, in some cases, actually feel more genuine?
More restorative, maybe.
Exactly.
Right.
It brings in that idea of restorative justice repairing harm through positive action, rather than just punishment or payment.
And then there's the challenge for the public figures themselves. How do they stay accessible, which people expect?
Right. They need to be out there meeting people.
While also protecting themselves from this kind of thing, from unintended associations amplified online. It seems like walking a tightrope.
A very delicate balancing act, absolutely. That connection with the public is vital for their work.
But that very openness now carries these new risks, doesn't it? In a world where, like you said, every interaction can be captured, shared instantly, globally.
Which leads us straight to the role of social media in driving this whole incident.
Undeniably huge.
Our sources emphasize just how fast those initial allegations spread, and how incredibly hard it is to correct that narrative once it takes hold.
It's like trying to unring a bell, isn't it?
Precisely. Even with the apology, the deletion of posts, the initial blast often leaves a mark. That first impression lingers.
So wrapping up this deep dive, what really stands out are these core tensions.
Yeah.
You've got the sheer speed of online accusations, this tightrope walk for public figures between accessibility and protection, and these really different ideas about what counts as a meaningful apology when a reputation's been damaged.
It's a really compelling situation, a case study almost, in the messiness of public life today.
Yeah.
The speed of information, how people perceive things, this whole evolving landscape of accountability and making amends, it's all there.
And it leaves us and you listening with this final thought to chew on. With information traveling so fast, so far, and images being so easily shared, how do we find the right balance? The balance between demanding accountability, which is essential, and avoiding unfair judgment based on associations that might be fleeting or completely unintentional. Definitely something worth thinking about.